As the last U.S. troops leave Afghanistan, it brings to an end a chaotic and dangerous evacuation effort. More than 100,000 Afghans were flown out to countries around the world to start new lives or reunite with loved ones. But many more have been left behind, some in the most tragic of circumstances.
Taekwondo champion Mohammed Sultani went to Kabul airport in the hope of starting a new life. Instead, his family are left mourning a life cut short.
He'd gone to the airport to register himself because he'd heard an announcement that anyone who was a sportsman or a former government employee, then they would take them out of the country.
Sultani was among those killed in last week's terror attack. Another victim of the very violence he was trying to escape. He leaves behind 2-year-old Zara and her big brother Zahid. He hasn't spoken since the explosion.
It was a really bad situation, and he just wanted to get out of the country. He wasn't alone in that. Many other people wanted to leave too because of the insecurity here.
Mohammed and his family are among them. Now en route to Europe, they got out just a day before the bomb attack. For the 20-year-old who has known only a Taliban-free homeland, leaving is bittersweet.
I love Afghanistan so much. That's where I have my friends and my relatives. And now we're leaving for a country where we don't have anyone. There will just be the 14 of us, and we won't have anyone to be with us in our happiness or sadness.
Activist Ghazal Habibyar and her family ran from the Taliban too. They heard the explosion as they began their journey to Albania.
There are times in your life when you feel guilty for being alive. That could have been us.
On the streets of Paris, the relief looks like this. Shakiba, living in France, spent days frantically arranging for her mother and siblings to be airlifted out.
All the fear fell away. I took her in my arms and I could feel her warmth. I rediscovered the smell of my mother. It's something I'd forgotten.
If any moment could convey just what is at stake, perhaps it is this embrace of a mother and daughter, just grateful to hold each other again.
We can speak now to Nargis Nehan. She's the former Minister of Mines and Petroleum in Afghanistan, and she's currently in Oslo in Norway. Thank you very much for joining us here on DW. You did arrive in Oslo a few days ago, but your father and sister remain in Afghanistan. So first of all, how are you and how is your family doing?
We are fine. Safely, we are evacuated to Oslo 6 days back with the support of Norwegian government. But sadly, we had to leave my father, my sister, and my brother-in-law behind because 2 times we tried to fly out from Kabul airport along with them, but because of the crowd and the rush that we had around the airport, it was impossible to take my father out, and we were about to lose him in that crowd. So that's why it was a very hard decision for me and my family that we had to come and we had to leave him behind. But this is not my story. This is the story of thousands of Afghans.
It must have been difficult to leave the country. What is it? What do you see now when you see the pictures of the Taliban? Oh, it looks like we do have our connection back up. We just lost you there briefly. I wanted to ask about how you saw those pictures of the Taliban now fully in control in Afghanistan. What went through your mind when you saw those images?
I mean, when I saw that, it is a very harsh reality that still we need time to accept it. But as soon as I saw, especially last night when the last few soldiers left Afghanistan and they took over Kabul airport as well, it's not only fall of Kabul and Afghanistan, it's actually fall of humanity and fall of an effort of the whole international community for the last 20 years that we all invested, and we just let it go so easily. So I see that myself as Afghan, I see that as my own failure. I see that as my leader's failure, and I see that as an international community's failure.
What about the situation for women in the country right now? The Taliban have said that women can work and get an education, but within Islamic law. Do you believe that women's rights will be upheld and respected?
I mean, Taliban, in several discussions that women had with them, even previously before they took Kabul, they kept on saying that we have changed, we are not going to implement the regressive and suppressive Sharia law that we did last time, and we are going to allow women so that they can work and they can have equal rights. But of course, in the beginning, they were saying that Islamic rights, but then later on, some of us, we began to educate ourselves about our rights from Islam perspective so that we can engage and debate with them. But then later on, they also added and they said that, Islamic rights and Afghani culture. So that is where the confusion started, because Afghanistan is a very diverse country and you have different and very diverse cultures. So when they say Afghan culture, it was confusing for us to understand exactly what do they mean, which culture do they mean. So we still, it's very early to say that what they will do. What we see that on one hand, those Taliban that they're in Kabul, they have not formed any government yet. They have not come up publicly with any policy with regard to treatment of women, except that they have said that women working in the public sector should remain at home until their next announcement, which we saw that as a big alarm. And then on top of that, what we saw that in some provinces, the Taliban that they are in those provinces, they have tried to come with their own policies and with their own announcement with regard to women movement and with regard to other groups and civil society and media. So we hope that once they form the government, it will be an inclusive government. They will include women in the government, and they will, and other ethnicities, minorities, and others as well. And inclusive government should not be limited only having representatives from different ethnicities. It should have representatives from different genders, from different social background, people of all ideologies, so that whoever is living in Afghanistan, somehow they see themselves part of that government.
And I'd like to ask, could you imagine going back and working with the Taliban?
I mean, as long as I have protection, and I know it's not going to be easy like previous governments that I was working with, but since, I mean, I'm committed to my people and I want to do whatever I can for bettering their life, if that means that I have to go and work with the Taliban, as long as they actually accept women's rights and they provide us with the basic human rights that we deserve to have, then we are willing to collaborate with them. Many of us are willing to go back and work under the Taliban rule. But it will be very difficult and actually impossible for us that on one hand, they do not recognize our existence in the system. They do not share anything with us. And they expect us to be at home. And then we also go and support the government that they'll be running. So if they want women's support inside the country and outside the country, they should understand that we have aspiration, we have expectation. We want to be part of the government. We want to be part of decision making. And then we will be helping them out with execution of those decisions. So all we are just looking and watching what kind of government they will form. And I really hope that the international community will begin to not reactively but proactively engage with the Taliban, and then tell them that if you need financial resources from the international community, if you need legitimacy from the international community, you need to come up with a more progressive, open and open, moderate, and an inclusive government.
And a last very brief question, if I may. What is your hope for the future of the country?
I mean, living, I have also seen such situation when I was child as when we migrated to Pakistan as refugee. So the only thing that kept us going was hope. So we still remain hopeful for the future. We still think that once Taliban get to Kabul, and then once they begin to run the country, then they will understand that running a nation and governing a country is not as easy as they think. And engaging with the international community is having its own set of rules and requirements that they need to begin to try to learn and understand that. And altogether, we are hoping that we'll be in a position that actually, instead of Taliban trying to suppress everything, we actually begin to work with the Taliban and make them open so that then we can form a better government and work together for the country.
Nargis Nehan, the former Minister of Mines and Petroleum in Afghanistan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, those that remain in Afghanistan face an uncertain future. The World Food Programme says 1/3 of Afghanistan's population is facing food insecurity. Along with food and water, medical supplies are also in short supply. We can speak now to Sarah Leahy. She's a project coordinator for Doctors Without Borders in Afghanistan's Lashkar Gah in Helmand province, and she joins us from Amsterdam. Sarah, thanks for joining us. Now that foreign troops have pulled out of Afghanistan, are there fears of a growing humanitarian crisis? I mean, what is the situation in Lashkar Gah at the moment?
Well, the situation is quite calm on the ground at the moment in Lashkar Gah since the fighting ended. During the fighting, it was incredibly intense around the hospital. All roads were blocked and it was virtually impossible for our patients to reach the hospital. Now that the fighting is over, people can reach us from rural areas, but other health facilities are not working due to a lack of supplies, a lack of staff. At the moment, we're just seeing a huge influx of patients. In our hospital, we're seeing over 800 patients per day, up to 860 in the emergency room, which is really enormous. Up to 70 deliveries per day in our maternity ward. So for years, the health system in Afghanistan has been really understaffed, under-equipped and underfunded. And now I think we're really seeing the continuation of that, or a deterioration.
You mentioned a lack of supplies. How is aid, if any, getting into the region?
Sure. Well, MSF was fortunate that we stockpiled medical supplies before the takeover, and as such we were able to supply our projects sufficiently in our 5 projects around the country. So in fact, in all 5 locations, we've been able to continue our medical activities. But of course, it's important to note that now supplies can't really reach the country. And we, in Lashkar Gah, where our hospital is based, we've seen that other health facilities are really struggling due to lack of supplies, and it's a really growing concern for the coming weeks or the future.
Can you tell us why Doctors Without Borders is working in Lashkar Gah in particular, and if you hope to be able to continue your work there?
Sure. Well, we've been there working since 2009 in Lashkar Gah, and the reason is quite simple. There's a dire need for medical provision there. There's a lack of other healthcare actors. The Afghan health system itself is pretty much collapsed and has always been understaffed and underfunded. Again, supplies are an issue. So we're seeing, I think our patient numbers speak for themselves. People can't access free healthcare in Helmand province in general, apart from in Lashkar Gah. And for sure, we've been able to continue our activities as normal, if you like, and we would hope that will continue under the new government, and we've no indication at the moment that won't happen.
Sarah Leahy, a project coordinator for Doctors Without Borders, joining us. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.